How has India's large population influenced its role in the global box office scenario, particularly regarding the popularity of Hollywood franchises like Marvel and Disney, where Indian audiences have become a significant target market?
Yeah. So, I mean, what we mostly been talking about is Indian films and how they're playing abroad. This question, if I understand correctly, is the growing importance of the Indian consumer, the Indian market for international entertainment. If you go back 10 years, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I think Hollywood had about zero point 0.9, meaning less than 1% in terms of box office market share per year in Indian film industry. Less than 1% of the money that was earned came from Hollywood movies. All Hollywood movies combined was less than 1%. Now, in less than, maybe a little bit over a decade, it's up to about 15%. That's a huge increase. And that's the rise of the Indian middle class. That's the changing taste and kind of palette, the kind of things that Indian audiences want to see. It is also that, Marvel movies in particular have become much more about, they're not so specifically Peter Parker or very specific American kind of things. They've become much more about the spectacle, right? It's like this superhero can do this crazy, interesting visual thing, and this one can do that. And if you're a kid in I don't know, Madhya Pradesh, you understand the visuals of the spectacle. So as Marvel movies have become much more visual and the spectacle has become like, because of visual effects, it's just become insane. It's just hugely amazing kind of visuals. That's been easier for the Indian audience to kind of say, oh yeah, I like to see that. And actually, the best example of this really goes back to Titanic, which is such an interesting thing because every time I've mentioned Titanic to Indian friends, they always say, yeah, Zach, yeah, but Titanic was like an Indian movie, really. And by that they mean like the story was so simple. It was almost like a melodramatic kind of love story. And yes, there was a boat that crashed, and it was a tragic ending, and all that kind of thing. And that was a very good example of a movie that was hugely popular around the world, but also not just because of spectacle, but because of universals. So I think I want to separate these two things. Hollywood has become much more successful in the Indian entertainment space, primarily because of spectacle in the movie space, and OTT players, Netflix, Amazon, Disney Hotstar, entering your screens at home and on your phones. So that has kind of been a cultural invasion, so to speak, right? Like that has really changed the landscape from even 2005. So that's one thing. But still, the universal story is really, and at the end of the day, that's the important thing to watch, because the spectacle is increasingly being done by Indian movies too. Again, 10 years ago, there wasn't, there was Raw 1 by Shah Rukh Khan, and once in a while there was a movie that attempted to be a big visual thing. Sanjay Leela Bhansali's wonderful, epic, the visual grandeur is great, but it's a different kind of spectacle than, your Marvel superheroes blowing up the world or something like that. And now, Indian movies can do really epic visuals in a way they never were able to do before. So this thing that Hollywood used to be the only one that could do that, and therefore got entrance into the Indian market, and not only that, went from 1% to 15%, I don't think they can rely on that as a selling point anymore. I think Indian audiences are going, yeah, it's okay, but we'd rather see the spectacle with our Indian storytelling. So the combination of the Indian storytelling with the rising visual effects, I think will negate the impact of Hollywood in terms of the movie scene. You've had a lot of force up to now, but I think it's going to be on the waning side. OTT is still a huge player, and that will affect viewing audiences easily for decades to come. But Indian market is more important for foreign filmmakers than it's ever been.